It's 12:43. Your baby is 37 minutes into a nap. The monitor just lit up. But before you move, your baby probably isn't awake. And what you do in the next 7 minutes will decide whether that nap dies right now or stretches into 2 full hours, 7 minutes, 2 hours. Let's get into it. Let's be honest about what exhaustion actually feels like. It's not just tired. It's the kind of foggy, bone-deep depletion where you lose track of what day it is. Where you find yourself standing in a room and genuinely cannot remember why you walked in. Where you've watched the baby monitor so long it starts to feel like a second heartbeat. You've tried everything. Different swaddles, white noise machines, a specific brand of pacifier recommended in a Facebook group at 2 a.m. You've rocked, bounced, shushed, fed, and started the whole cycle over again so many times it feels less like a routine and more like a sentence. And the naps are the cruelest part. Because they're almost long enough. 35 minutes, sometimes 40. Enough to raise your hopes, but never enough to actually restore you. You haven't failed. Your baby isn't broken. You're not doing it wrong because you care too much. You're doing it wrong, not because you don't care, not because you're a bad parent, but because no one has ever actually explained how baby sleep works. Here's what's actually happening. Baby sleep runs in cycles, and right around 4 months old, those cycles change permanently into adult-like stages. Short ones, roughly 40 to 50 minutes each. And at the end of every single cycle, your baby surfaces into a lighter stage of sleep. Eyes might flutter, a grunt, a brief cry. And to you, standing outside that door, it sounds exactly like waking up. That fuss you hear at 38 minutes? That's not waking up. That's transitioning. Think about it this way. Imagine you're in the lightest phase of sleep, halfway aware of the room around you. And right at that moment, someone comes in, turns on a light, picks you up, and starts talking to you. You'd wake all the way up, every single time, not because you needed to be awake, but because the response made it happen. That's what happens when you rush in at the first sound. A baby who is genuinely awake will escalate. The cry gets louder, more urgent, more purposeful. A baby who is cycling will often settle back on their own within minutes, if given the space to try. When you go in too quickly, you aren't rescuing your baby from distress. You're creating it. Not because your instinct is wrong, but because going in too fast doesn't protect the nap. It ends it every single time. Now let's go one level deeper into what's actually happening inside your baby's body during that 38-minute window. First, temperature. Your baby's body is supposed to drop in temperature as sleep deepens. Along with darkness, which signals the brain to release melatonin, this temperature drop is the trigger to push the cycle further down. If the room is too warm, that drop doesn't happen cleanly. The nap stays shallow, and shallow naps end at 38 minutes, every time. Second, cortisol. This is the stress hormone, and it is the enemy of long naps. When your baby is overtired, pushed past their natural sleep window, cortisol floods their system. It doesn't just make it harder to fall asleep, it actively disrupts the ability to stay asleep. An overtired baby isn't a baby who sleeps longer, it's a baby running on stress hormones. Every full waking, and you're starting the whole nap over from zero. Third, and this is the most important one, sleep linking. Adults cycle between light and deep sleep automatically. We stir, and we slide back down without ever fully waking. Babies are learning to do exactly that. It is a skill, and like any skill, it requires practice, the right conditions, and critically, the chance to try. Every time you go in at the first sound, you take that chance away. The skill never gets to develop. So what does letting it develop actually look like? Here's exactly what you do. 3 phases, 7 minutes, here's exactly what you do. You hear the sound, and you don't move. This is harder than it sounds. Your whole nervous system wants to respond. But you watch. Is it escalating, getting louder, more rhythmic, more distressed? Or is it a grunt, a shuffle, a cry that doesn't build? If it's not escalating, you stay. If they settle completely and drift off during this pause, you've won. Walk away. The timer ends. But hear this loud and clear. If at any point that fuss turns into genuine, escalating panic, the timer stops. You go in. This framework is for transitional fussing, not distress. But if they are just shuffling and grunting, this isn't abandonment. This is observation. You are paying more attention, not less. Still fussing but not escalating? You go in, quietly. Lights stay off. You don't lift them. You put one hand flat and steady on their chest. You might feel your own heart racing. That's okay. A low, rhythmic shush, barely above a whisper, steady as a metronome. You're not ignoring them, you're regulating them. And there is a difference. The goal is simple: calm the nervous system without triggering full wakefulness. Now you pull back. Less shushing, less touch. You stay nearby, a quiet, anchoring presence, but you stop doing and keep your eyes down. Direct eye contact is a massive stimulant. It tells their brain it's time to play. Look at their chest instead. You're giving your baby the bridge between your support and their own ability to settle. It's uncomfortable. Your instinct says more, the framework says less. Trust the framework. By minute 7, one of two things will have happened. Your baby will have drifted back into a full sleep cycle. Or the crying will have escalated clearly enough that you know, without doubt, that they genuinely need you. Either way, you'll know exactly what to do. And you'll have a system, finally, for telling the difference. The 7-minute rule works, but it works significantly harder when the room is doing its job too, and most rooms aren't. Temperature first. The target is 18 to 22 degrees Celsius. That's 65 to 72 degrees Fahrenheit. If you live somewhere warm, focus on airflow. A fan circulating air does most of the work even without air conditioning. And while nothing replaces putting your baby to sleep on their back in an empty crib, studies show a fan in the room drastically reduces sleep-related risks just by keeping fresh air moving. Don't point it directly at your baby. You want air movement, not a draft. The goal is helping the body achieve the temperature drop that triggers deeper sleep. Darkness matters just as much. Light is one of the most powerful signals the brain uses to stay awake. Blackout curtain, or even a dark towel over the window, can extend nap duration on its own, especially in summer or east-facing rooms. Last, quick layer check. Press the back of your baby's neck. Damp or warm. They're overdressed for sleep. Cool and dry is the target. Not cold, comfortable. These aren't preferences. They're the infrastructure the 7-minute rule runs on. Most parents track wake windows, the maximum amount of time a baby should be awake between naps. That's a great start, but it's not the whole picture. Before you put your baby down, do a 3-second scan. Eyes slightly glazed, movement slowing down, interest in play, dropping off. That's the window. That's your cue. Go! Because here's what happens when you wait too long. Fussing starts, cortisol rises, and now you're chasing the window instead of landing inside it. One more layer, total 24-hour sleep load. A baby who's been chronically underslept carries a cortisol baseline into every nap. The framework works faster when overnight sleep is also protected. Fix the naps, and the nights start to follow. Let me tell you about a family I worked with, a 6-month-old boy. Naps that had never once lasted longer than 38 minutes. 2 parents who had been rushing in at the first sound for so long, it had become pure reflex. They weren't even thinking about it anymore. The nap ending felt inevitable, like something that just happened to them. They committed to the 7-minute framework. 5 days. That was all. Day 1 was brutal. They stood outside the door, and their son fussed. 63 seconds of it. They counted. They didn't go in. At minute 3, it stopped. The baby was quiet. The nap ran another 45 minutes. The mother described it as the strangest feeling she'd ever had. Relief, followed immediately by guilt, followed by the slow realization that the guilt was wrong. She said, "I thought he was upset with us for not coming, but he was just finishing his nap." By day 3, naps were reliably hitting 90 minutes. By day 5, they'd stopped watching the monitor at the 38-minute mark altogether. The cortisol cycle had broken. The room was cooler. The timing was sharper. A family that had spent 6 months counting minutes finally stopped counting. That afternoon, while their son slept, his mother made a cup of tea and sat down. She said it felt like the first time she'd done that in half a year. Nothing else changed, just those 3 things. Now, the questions you're probably sitting with. What if my baby escalates immediately? Then you go in. The 7-minute window is for the stop-start fuss, the transitional noise. It is never for distress. An escalating cry is always your cue to respond. You'll learn the difference faster than you expect, because you already know your baby sounds better than anyone. What if my baby sleeps in a bassinet or we room share? The same principles apply. The pause, the reduction in stimulation, the temperature conditions, none of this requires a standalone nursery. Modify the support phase to gentle in-place settling, without lifting or fully engaging. The timing logic is identical. See, we live somewhere hot. Airflow first, every time. A circulating fan, breathable layers, keeping direct sunlight off the sleep space. All of these move the needle meaningfully, even without air conditioning. And one more. What if my baby is younger than 4 months? Give yourself grace. Under 12 to 16 weeks, their neurological sleep cycles haven't fully matured yet. You can practice a 60-second pause just to see what they do, but know that linking naps independently is a developmental milestone that is still weeks away. Don't force a system on a brain that isn't ready for it. But if they have a sensitive temperament, just make the transition out of phase 3 slower. Ease back instead of stepping back. The core logic remains. This is guided regulation. You've been teaching your baby, slowly, consistently, over days, that the transition between sleep cycles is safe, that they don't need to be fully rescued every time their body surfaces into lighter sleep, that they have a growing capacity to return to rest on their own, not cry it out, not abandonment, something entirely different, and something that builds, because once that capacity develops, it compounds. Better naps mean lower cortisol. Lower cortisol means better overnight sleep. Better overnight sleep means a more regulated, more available baby during every waking hour. The whole system improves, not because you forced a behavior, but because you allowed a skill to grow. And your attachment? Strengthened, not weakened. A rested baby is a more connected baby, and a less depleted parent is a more present one. 3 pillars. That's the whole system. Cool the room. Give your baby's body the conditions it needs to cycle through sleep properly. Pause the impulse. Give your baby the space to link sleep cycles before you step in. Support without resetting. When you do go in, regulate without lifting out. Presence without disruption. That's the 7-minute difference. You haven't failed. Your baby isn't broken. You just needed the system, and now you have it. If you're a different kind of exhausted right now, not the desperate kind, but the kind that has a plan, hit subscribe. Every week is another framework. Another thing no one told you, and another reason to feel a little less alone at 12:43.